All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. My name is Brian Snyder, and I got Paul Beets joining me today. I'm so excited for this episode. We are Indy investors talking to Indy investing, and that's what we like to do on this podcast is really just kind of break it down, give you a little education, give a little insights, give you our tips, talk about our mistakes and how we mess up each and every day in real estate and how you guys can hopefully learn from it. So with that, let's get on with the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I am very excited to have my guest on here with me today, Mr. Paul Beets. How are you doing, brother?
Living the dream, man, every day.
Awesome. You are living the dream, man. You got the little tropical beach behind you and stuff like
absolutely.
that. So when you're up in Detroit, Michigan, you got to kind of envision that you're on the beach somewhere, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join me. And you're somebody that I've really enjoyed working with here in, just in Indy and just real estate in general. We've kind of built up a pretty good friendship and stuff just through some of the investing that we've done. So I appreciate, kind of what you do, your heart behind it, and the insights that you bring too. I always like those times too when you're like, hey, Brian, you guys should be doing this, or why aren't you guys doing this? So challenge me a little bit. So I always appreciate that. So if you don't mind, let's kind of get into just a little bit of, starting off just a little bit of your background of kind of what you do and then how you got into real estate.
Sure. So I grew up in Indiana, went to Purdue, got a great, engineering degree, ended up going to Michigan, working in the automotive industry, got a master's degree. So, did everything that, the mainstream says this is the way you should lead your life, right? Getting college educations and buying a big house, having 2.5 kids, etc. And so the way I got into real estate is I started kind of feeling like, I was stuck. I had a mortgage and I had a job and I was stuck to my job because I had my mortgage. And so I found an ad on Facebook. It was 2017, I think. Basically talking about how to pay your home off in 5 to 7 years. And it ended up being from a company called Replace Your Mortgage. They basically are teaching, I'm sure some of your listeners have heard velocity banking. So the idea of using a home equity line of credit or even like some credit cards, putting all your debt into this debt tool and then all your income into that tool and then paying your expenses out of it. And so, as long as you're cash flow positive, you're paying that mortgage or that credit card down very, very quickly. And so it doesn't give time for the interest to really impact you. And so I ended up signing up for this program, got involved with this company. And as soon as I joined this Facebook group, it was full of a whole bunch of people that had their homes completely paid off or had paid them down substantially, had a huge line of credit on their home. And what were they doing? They were going and buying real estate. And real estate, tell me about this real estate thing. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to groan when I say this, but one of the first people that was even kind of involved with Replace Your Mortgage was Clayton Morris. And I know, man, he's not a popular person in Indianapolis, but my feeling is, I still listen to his podcast. I'm not a big fan of what happened in Indianapolis. I'm not a big fan of some of the people that he interacted with, but his podcast is what motivated me to get started in real estate. And a lot of the content in his podcast, I still think is very valid and relevant. And so, disappointed to see, he got mixed up with the wrong crowd, but big fan of the content of his podcast. And so that's how I got into real estate. From there, learned about the BRRRR process, bigger pockets, got involved that way. And so that's, really just being involved with that Replace Your Mortgage group and getting into a home equity line of credit. I bought my first property from Simple Wholesaling for $27,000 off of my home equity line of credit. So
I remember that. So it was a good time. So I remember working that deal with you, and we had some kinks to work out with it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It all worked out. So
it did.
No, and you bringing up, Clayton Morris, it's just kind of what you're talking about. Like you said, there's some really good, really good insight, and really good content on his podcast and some of the things he put out, and even like what he was doing or what they were doing. The idea behind it is all solid.
Yeah.
But it's a really good example too of no matter what you're doing, it's whether it's in real estate in Indy or wherever, of making sure that you're doing the background on who you're working with, understanding what their core values are, what their principles are, and really how they do business too. I know a
Absolutely.
lot of people don't want to give away, the secret sauce or anything, but you need to be knowing how they're operating, how they're coming about things and stuff. So I think that's really important. So you're in the auto industry, working for, up there in Detroit. So why did why Indy? Is it just because you were from here? You graduated from Purdue and stuff like that. You just wanted to,
Yeah.
you like this idea
Well,
here. Why not Detroit, I guess then?
yeah, Clayton Morris was very active in
Yeah.
Indianapolis during that period of time, and he talked Indianapolis up about how it's a great rental market. This was back in 2018. I think there's been a lot of investors dive into Indy even since then.
Yeah.
But you know Clayton Morris saying this is a great place to invest in real estate, and then of course I'm a little nostalgic for the city. I grew up in Lafayette, or just close to Lafayette. But when we'd go Christmas shopping, we'd go to the big city of Indianapolis, right? And it's all decked out, the Christmas tree downtown, in the circle. And so it's just, and I lived there for a few years, 2010 to 2014. So just nostalgic for the city. Love the city. Love people from Indiana. There's just, especially if people have traveled around, you realize that people that live in Indiana and are from Indiana, they're just a special kind of person. And so I love working with people like yourself and others in Indianapolis, good, wholesome, Christian, honest people. And I've had a great experience there. So I'm glad that I started in Indianapolis. That's why I started there, is, Clayton Morris recommending it, but also a little bit of my home, nostalgia.
Yeah. So now the big question, I guess, really is that I know people from Lafayette, they're usually either going to be Bears fans or Colts fans, or now you're up there. Are you a Lions fan? Where do your
Oh
alliance
man.
lay there, Paul?
So I grew up, almost everybody that I grew up with were Cubs fans.
Yeah.
Now, I still, even to this day, feel a little bit bad for them, but man, they still go up to Wrigley and watch the games. But I mean, we were certainly Colts fans growing up. Jim Harbaugh and Peyton Manning were a big, loved watching those guys play ball. And when I moved to, after I graduated Purdue, I moved to Detroit, and everybody told me that I had to become a Lions fan. And, I've been associated with the city for more than 15 years, and I just can't do it. It's just a sad organization that, after almost 50 years, they can't get their stuff together,
I understand. I
So.
understand. As a Browns fan, I actually kind of I feel bad for Lions fans. So
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll move on from the football talk, I guess, and
yeah,
kind of other
right.
stuff. So no, it's good that with the Colts being back and Indiana, Purdue having some good weeks too. So no, it's a good
Yeah.
time for football over here. But so I know you also your wife, she's also in the real estate game. So why don't you guys talk about that a little bit, of kind of like you guys being able to have those conversations and be able to challenge each other and just be able to
Mhm.
kind of work with each other within the real estate space.
Yeah, it's funny because we run into people all the time, and I think a lot of investors kind of lament how great it would be if their spouse, we were the dynamic duo, real estate duo. I never planned it out that way, but I will say, she understands my business, the traditional rentals in Indianapolis, and I understand her business here in Metro Detroit, the Airbnb business. And we've actually started doing a few Airbnbs in Indianapolis as well. But it's great for our marriage. It's great, for us to kind of share that, that common viewpoint on the world. But it also gives her something that she can do that's her own, right? She manages her books, she manages her bank account, she manages her business, and then I'm just there to pitch in, right? And then it's the same thing in Indianapolis. She helps me, with staging and picking out colors and countertops and different things. But for the most part, I run my own business, right? So it's almost, we definitely benefit each other, but we're also separate. So it's a great relationship or structure the way we've got it.
Nice. Can you speak to a little bit about just like kind of how the Airbnb market is doing in Indy? I know you
Sure.
know, when COVID hit, you know, back in, you know, March and April and May, like it was really tough. But a lot of the
Yeah.
Airbnb investors that I've talked to since then, they've been like at capacity and doing pretty well. Is
Yeah.
that the same for you? Or not to put you on the spot or anything, but share your numbers,
No,
Paul.
no. So what I'll tell you is I'm not an expert in the Indianapolis Airbnb market by any stretch of the imagination, but I am pretty familiar with what happened in Detroit. And we have one active Airbnb there in Indianapolis. And what I'll say about that one is that it's doing better now than it was before the pandemic. And I suspect, even though I don't know this for sure, but I suspect it's very similar to what happened up in Metro Detroit, where there's, you know, you separate the boys from the men. You know, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you know, in March or April when this whole thing hit, we had a wave of cancellations. I mean, like our phone was buzzing. I turned it off. It just making me sick to my stomach because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But her phone was buzzing and buzzing, cancellation, cancellation, cancellation. So March and even April were ugly, to just say the very least. And I think there's been some articles where, you know, people, you know, lost their homes and you know, their only form of income was Airbnb. And so this and that. So I suspect that there was a number of people that bowed out of the game. Indy was over white hot when it came to Airbnb. Probably there were more Airbnbs than there was demand.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
you know, we opened the Airbnb and then it just sat vacant, and that was crazy to us because in Metro Detroit, man, the day that we opened our first Airbnb in Metro Detroit, it filled up, and we had like 99% occupancy. So it was just weird to us because we didn't know the market.
Yeah.
But it's doing a lot better now because I think that we've weeded out some of those folks that just were, you know, not really able to hold their own during the really tough period, and so we're doing a lot better now. And her business is, you know, the pandemic. We're thriving during the pandemic instead of struggling, and it was scary and at the beginning, but we've really bounced back very nicely, and she's brought on a whole bunch more customers, and so it's been a great thing for us. But I know for many people it was very difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's tough to travel now, and it's tough to, you know, there's different regulations and things like that, but still people have that urge to travel. So they're
Yeah.
doing a lot of the staycations and things like that. So
Hmm.
it's still a pretty good, you know, Airbnbs are still doing quite well in Indy, and there's still people that are traveling here for different conferences and
Yeah.
things like that because people are going to have them here in Indy. I do want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about, so you fall in a unique category to where you are an out-of-state investor, but you're close enough to shoot down here to Indy if you need to check on some things. So
Sure.
how do you balance that of being able to, oh no, I'll just kind of let it go, or I can wait till, you know, next month, or I'll wait till my next schedule to visit, or it's like, oh, I need to check on this, or I need to go talk to a contractor. How are you balancing that? And like, even what's the benefit that you see in like being so close, even though you are kind of, you know, you still fall in that out of state category?
Yeah. So what I'll start out saying is that I really see myself first as an out-of-state investor. You know, most, probably 90% of all the work that I do in Indy, I do it remotely. So I could be on the moon, you know, as long as I had a cell phone. You know, I do benefit from when I'm coming into town, walking the properties and seeing the things for myself, because as an owner, you of any place in the world, you are going to have the highest standards of anybody. So even my most trusted people don't see the things that I see. So I definitely, you know, think that out of state investors, at least like a quarterly or twice a year, should make a trip and visit their properties wherever they're at, if they're in Indy or not. So I'm very fortunate that it's a 5-hour drive door to door for where I live in Metro Detroit down to Indianapolis. But really, you know, how do I decide when I'm going to drive down? It's when my mom wants to see the grandkids. I mean, that's the big driver of, hey, when are we going to go down next?
Yeah.
I can't think of a one time where I've had like such a major issue that I had to get on the road and come down and see it. You know, and what I'll tell you is I'm very fortunate that a lot of my job, my engineering job, I spent 20 years managing engineers all around the world. I managed a 400-person engineering project where 80% of them were in China. And so you develop a communication style, you develop, a way of setting expectations, holding them to expectations, and, and confirming, that expectations were met, and if they weren't, putting a recovery plan in place. So I think that I've benefited from that in my real estate, when I'm interacting with contractors and property management, et cetera. And a lot of it's building relationships. And so when I'm in town, I try to meet with you guys. You and I've had coffee multiple times on my trips down there. And so, when I can, I try to do that face-to-face relationship building. But I'm very fortunate. I've never had let's get in the car, we got to go to Indy, something bad's happening. I've been able to really handle most of it remotely.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's great. And I think what you said is right on point with when you are, developing a team and developing your people and working with and making those connections of setting the expectations of, hey, here are my expectations for you. Here's what your expectations can be of me. Here's how I perform, or how I intend to perform. Like, that's all great stuff, and things like those are conversations that need to be had and need to be done. So that's good. I know, when it comes to making connections and stuff, I think if anybody hasn't known you or anything, they've at least seen your name somewhere in all the Facebook groups and, coming through there. So I love to hear you talk about that a little bit, because I'm not a big social media person. I do what I can, but it's kind of one of those things, just like, it's just not my mold or anything. But how has utilizing social media and some of the Facebook groups and just some of those things helped you along the way to make connections, meet new people, network, but then also help build your team as well?
Yeah, I can't really put my finger on it. I seem to be pretty good at it, I guess. One of the things I did with Facebook, I know a lot of people that have gotten fed up with Facebook, whether they're, political posts or cat videos or whatever. And I still am friends with many of the people that I grew up with, or friends, different various places that I've lived. But what I've done is I've gone through and I've set my privacy filters, and I've set all of my priorities, what I want to see in my news feed. It's all focused around real estate. And so really, Facebook for me is very much just a real estate networking tool. And when I see something that I don't like, or I think is distracting from my real estate endeavors, I just go in there and I turn it off. And probably if my mom or somebody's going to see this and say, you didn't see the picture of my cat or whatever, well, probably not. Because
unless it was in front of a house, I didn't see it.
So. Exactly. Unless it was in front of one of my rentals, it wasn't. So, and then, I tell everybody, man, join every real estate group that you can. And there's a wholesaler here in Metro Detroit that is, more nationally networked than I am. But every once in a while, he and I will run into each other in like a Florida group or like an Arizona group, because I'm always looking for the next market, or, to expand, or and just meet new people in real estate. And so I'm a part of a lot of groups, Burr groups and velocity banking groups and infinite banking groups and replace your mortgage groups and real estate. And so, I'm very active, and I contribute, my viewpoints and my experiences. Oftentimes I have mentored people for free, because I benefited from a lot of people giving away free knowledge. And so I want to pay it forward and give away my free knowledge. So I'm kind of like I don't know. I don't like to think of myself as a free guru, because I don't know that I'm an expert in anything. But I like to share what knowledge that I have, and then learn from others. And in Indianapolis, it's been great. I've met a lot of people through social media, spoken to quite a few people on the phone. And actually one of them, my wife is furnishing his Airbnb. I'm not going to call him out on the podcast here, but he and I had talked some time ago on the phone. He just had, shared knowledge about the Indy market and what I was doing, what he was doing. And then he decided he wanted to convert one of his rentals over to Airbnb. And I commented on one of his posts, and he said he called me. There's a whole big long list of people that were like, "Oh yeah, I can help you. I can help you." And I was down at the bottom, and he called me. He said, "Man, you and I have talked before. I trust you. If you guys can make this happen, And so one thing led to another, and now my wife is like finished, furnishing his Airbnb and getting it ready, and he's gonna stay in it for during the symposium. So,
Nice.
I just really believe in meeting people, networking with people. And when I first took that phone call from him, I had no expectations for what was going to come out of it. I was going to share my knowledge. He was going to share his, and if there was nothing there, there's nothing there. But what I found is the more you do that, it's like opportunities arise, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I tell everybody real estate is a people business.
Yeah.
And it's been very true for me, and I've benefited greatly from just meeting new people and interacting with them online.
Good. Yeah, there's something being said for, just kind of, putting yourself out there a little bit with it. And, that comes along, I think, with any networking and, anything like that. But especially I have, like, I will 100% say, and talking to other people in different markets throughout the nation, I feel like Indianapolis is one of the most, I guess, just welcoming communities when it comes to real estate.
Yeah.
There are going to be people out there that you got to be careful of, and that's with anything. But
Yep.
I think as far as, if you have any questions or you have anything to put out there, just if you put it out there in some of the groups or just talk to people out in the community of Indianapolis, a lot of people are going to be, are good with putting forth that information and helping you out. And I really
Yep.
do think we look at it as a community of being people that like-minded people that want to help each other and just want the city to succeed in real estate and all the different aspects as well. So I do want to ask you, now that you put it out there as you being a free guru and everything, I'm gonna pick your brain about some of this money stuff. So what tips do you have for somebody out there that is looking to, just when it comes to Indianapolis, using the BRRRR strategy or using other people's money or hard money? What are some tips you have for somebody out there that's, might not have the cash for themselves, but need to utilize cash in some way to help out their investing?
Yeah. So, my advice to somebody getting started and doesn't have any private money or contacts yet is you really have to build a reputation and a track record of success. And so, just like I did with my first deal with you guys, I bought my first rental with my own cash. I rehabbed it with my own cash, and I got it rented out, right, with a property manager there in town. And, there were a few different strategies that I used to, hard money, and others that are more expensive and more, require a little bit more paperwork to get done. For my first few deals, I was on the hook for them, right? Like, my own cash and high points and fees and stuff like that. But once I built that track record, 2 or 3 properties, look, I bought it, I rehabbed it, I got it rented out, and I cashed a majority of my cash out. You kind of develop this portfolio, and through your interactions with other people, you build these relationships. And some people don't want to be landlords. They don't want to have tenants or maintenance or, have a team in Indy that they can rely on. They're just looking for a passive income. And so actually, back to that Replace Your Mortgage group, there's a bunch of people that they don't want to be landlords, and they either have equity in their HELOC that they can lend out. They have infinite banking policies that they can lend out. They have self-directed IRAs that they can lend out. And so a lot of my private lenders have come out of that group. It's just I've just been part of that group and interacting with them, and talking about what their interests are, what my interests are. And again, it's a relationship business. It's a people business.
Yeah.
And so now I've got, probably 4 or 5 private lenders that I hardly ever buy real estate with my own money,
Yeah.
right? I leverage other people's money, and it's a win-win. They get a nice return on their investment for their retirement, and I'm able to build wealth, through buying cash flowing assets.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things of no matter what you're doing or no matter what you need, just talk about it. If you're looking for properties, put it out there like, hey, I'm looking for properties. I'm doing this. Same thing.
Yep.
I'm looking for money. I'm looking for, if you're doing that. But I think you bring up a really good point of kind of having that track record. And, if you're able to kind of put together a portfolio or like, hey, this is kind of here's a packet of what I've done in the past, and being able to
Mhm.
have that credibility, I guess, that comes along with that packet is a
Yeah.
really good move. So, all right, Paul, I really appreciate your time. We got time for one more question for you here. And it's just what's something that what's a mistake that maybe you've made along the way that you've learned from, that somebody that's listening to this show could really, maybe they're in that same situation, or maybe they're almost ready to make that same mistake, but what's something that you've kind of learned from that you can pass on to somebody else?
Yeah. What I'd say is trust your gut. Like I've always, like I had a situation with one of my rental properties very early on where I had a great contractor. He did quality work. He continues to work for me today, but I felt like he wasn't as fast as in the BRRRR process. You want to keep your money moving, and he just wasn't as fast as I wanted him to be. And so I started shopping for a different contractor, and I ended up with a contractor that just didn't really do a very good job. He was super fast. He did a great job, real fast, and it was at the right price. It was even cheaper than this guy, so it was faster and cheaper. But the quality was not good. And so what I learned from that is from the very beginning I kind of had a sinking feeling in my stomach, right? Especially when we started picking out some of the materials that were going to go into the project. When I drove down and looked at the project, the people that were working on the project, it just had a bad feeling on it. And so, don't feel like you can't start over. You can't, if you get into it and you're not feeling good, don't put good money after bad. Just pull out, shake hands, amicably separate, and try to make the best of it. But uh, you know building those relationships and working with, nobody's perfect, no contractor's perfect. They all have their challenges, their pluses and minuses. And if you can find somebody that's 80% in the areas that are most of your concern. And I think, long term, quality of the properties is most important to me. Somebody that can live in a quality property that has low maintenance costs for me, that's absolutely critical for me. And so, nowadays, man, if it takes him 6 months to rehab it, then it takes him 6 months. But after those 6 months, I'll have a quality product that's not going to eat me alive on maintenance. And that's what's more important, because of all the properties that are maintenance nightmares, it's those properties that I deviated from my gut and ended up going with a contractor that I didn't really understand and thought I was getting a good deal out of, and I'm paying the difference.
Right. So, no, really good tip. And I'll kind of even just throw it in there too. When you do feel like you need to have those tough conversations, just have that tough conversation instead of putting
Absolutely.
it off and things like that. So a lot of times those conversations, you worry about them and you're like, oh man, I'll wait till next week or whatever. Just have that conversation. Usually right after you're like, oh, that wasn't bad. That was okay. I needed to do
Yeah,
that. So,
absolutely.
no, good stuff, Paul. I really appreciate you. If anybody has any more questions for Paul or anything like that, you can definitely, put underneath this, the links on any of our social media stuff, or just reach out to him, Mr. Paul Beets. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And with that, this is another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.